This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. You are listening to One Human Nation with your host, Sandy Batiste. This program will be talking about race and race relations in your community and nationally. Our goal is to be open, honest, and productive.
Welcome to the One Human Nation show. I'm your host, Sandy Batiste. Welcome back and listening in to today's show. And we will have a guest on today's show. So as we prepare for that, I do want to give you some insights, but I do want to do this particular disclaimer before we get started. The viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. So the guest that's going to be coming on the show is actually a recent high school graduate in Savannah, and she has already accepted and, of course, I shouldn't say of course, but she'll be going to college. So she was willing to share her stories. And it was interesting to hear stories from someone that is recently graduating from high school, and her story through elementary school, junior high, and high school is so much different from my story. And it really got me thinking about and really relating to some of the things that I'm reading in this book that I highly recommend. And it's entitled, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Now, before you turn off about that, it's not only about black kids. It really starts talking about when do we form our racial identity? And it shares information. And this is written by a psychologist, Beverly Daniel Tatum, PhD. And she talks in terms of Asian Pacific Americans, Latinos, American Indians, Chinese, just different groups. But, if you've ever wondered, and it gets to be something that I think I noticed more and more as I got more into my adult years, as far as after college, is there is a tendency to group together. And her book really gets into this. And what I like about it, it also has a discussion session at the end of it. So for those of you that have book clubs and want to form a reading group, I would highly recommend this book, because it really gets into how she dealt with addressing these issues with her kids at a very young age, because it's all about what kind of responses do you make if your child is one of those child that really notices things that are different. And I think there is a certain age that's a very apparent thing to them. If something is different about somebody, whether it's the color of their skin or whether they may have a disability or something else, they pretty much call it out. And it's always interesting when I hear it, because especially if you could tell the parents are like very uncomfortable about it, and it gets you, it can be funny, but then you're kind of listening, well, I wonder how they are going to respond to that. So I would highly recommend this book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And I wanted to, I'm interested in the guest that's going to be talking to you about her journey and her awareness in context to how the environment was that she grew up in. So here's a funny story from today, and I want to share the story with you because it really did stand out to me that it emphasizes that there are no experts in this journey. So, just because I host a radio show, please in no way think that I am one of those people that says, oh, well, you need to listen to me because I host a radio show. That is not the case at all. So today I was in a store where you can get your car washed as well as you can get an oil change. And so I was doing the oil change part, but the waiting room is all common area. And so one of the things interesting for me being back in Savannah is that very often it's a predominant African American group that's there. It's totally different from the environment in Austin, where I might on a specific day see another black person at a restaurant or something else. But for the most part, when you're running around getting your errands, getting things done, you may or may not see another black person. That's the environment that I was adjusted to. And in Savannah, it's totally different. So it's like, in a way, really wonderful. But today, as I was sitting there, the folks that were waiting for their cars to be finished through the car wash, there was an announcer, a person that came on and announced that their car was ready. Well, this person had a very strong Spanish accent. And it was so funny to me because at first when I heard it, I was like, oh, okay, this is okay. This is pretty good. Well, and I understood him, which in itself is pretty funny because I could hear the other African Americans in the room saying, do you understand what he's saying? I can't understand what he's saying. And it was just like going on and on. And those of you that really know me know I have the ability to tune out things very well. That's just kind of how my environment's been. It's like, well, I'm just going to ignore that. So I don't know how long this has been going on because it's obviously this is the guy that's been announcing, when the cars are ready. But I thought it was pretty funny because we do get so accustomed and adjusted to what we are comfortable with, that when we hear a different language, even though he was speaking English, they had a hard time understanding because of the accent. So that's one of the other reasons why I think it's so important for shows like the One Human Nation radio show. It's so important for us to really immerse ourselves in other cultures, to get out of our comfort zone. And I know this is something new for Savannah, or relatively new, probably in the past 20 years. So it's not that new to have a higher population of Mexican Americans here, Latinos, because it's not like in Austin and San Antonio. A lot of it was the Mexican culture. So here it's, there could be a combination of different Latino cultures. So I just thought it was funny because I've shared with you before that my Spanish is not there after all those years living in Texas. But obviously I did pick up on something because his accent, it didn't bother me. As a matter of fact, there was something comforting about it, and being able to hear a different accent that was familiar, as opposed to, just thinking, okay, it let me know that there is cultural diversity in Savannah, and I've noticed it before, but we all have to notice it. We all have to be conscious and aware and intentional about learning about other cultures. So that's my funny story about cultural diversity and inclusion, and how we make judgments based on what we hear. And that's that external culture. When you think about the iceberg, it's what we hear, it's the language. And I'm sure there were some assumptions being made about this person. Of course, you never saw the person because he was just coming over the announcing system. So I thought that was a pretty interesting experience today for cultural diversity. And it just reminded me how far we have to go as a country. And it emphasized again, or reinforced once again, that this is not only a white and black situation. It is no matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you're a person of color, whether you're white, it's all of our stories. it's a combination of, do we know our past history, and what is it going to take for us to be comfortable with other cultures? So as we come up on the weekend and different activities, and we're in the summertime, I hope those of you that have children are really getting them immersed in another culture and making sure that their exposure is not always so one-sided, because in order for us to get more comfortable around each other, we really do have to at least listen or engage with another culture. So as we get ready for the guest that's going to be calling in, I do want our mindsets to adjust to some of the things that she'll be sharing, because, it's all relative. It's all about what is our story. If you want to share your story, you can also connect with me at my story at onehumannation.info. One of the things I do want to point out to you that on the website for onehumannation.info, and that's www.onehumannation.info, when you go there now, all of the recorded shows are posted right there. You don't have to click on anything. That's how the home page is set up. So I wanted to make sure that the recordings were very easy to get to. Now, the only problem is if you're accessing the recordings there's really not a description about what the show is about. If you want to actually access the description, you would have to do that from WRUU.org, the station's website. And you're listening to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. So some of the questions that I want you to think about if you haven't started your own journey and really start looking at being intentional, because it's not about judgment. It's like, when was the first time that you experienced this thing called race? When was the first time that it came on your psyche, whether it was a good experience, whether it was a bad experience, that you were aware? Because that's something that the guest today is going to be sharing with us. And sometimes it depends on the environment that we're in. It may not happen if we're in one culture without being exposed to any other culture. That's the world we live in. And this is not judgment. This is not saying, hey, that's a good thing or a bad thing. The question is, when were you first aware? Because part of the journey of going through reconciliation and healing is, we can't remain in a stage of denial. I know that would be ideal, because it is a very difficult topic to start looking at, because no one wants to take ownership of the responsibility of race and racism in this country. And so that there is a lot of denial on both sides. And it's totally understandable. But in order for us to move towards being one human nation, I think it's very important that we start looking at what is that point that we became aware. And are we curious? Are we judgmental about other cultures? If the language is different, are we accepting of other religious beliefs? Where are we in our journey? And that's a personal question. That is not something that anyone can answer for you. And hopefully you're not walking around asking people, well, do you think I'm a racist? Because you might not like the answer, or they may not give you an answer, or they may give you an answer that's not correct. So it's not about judgment. It's about exploring where you are in your journey and being curious. in discovering what experience did you have, and how is that shaping your interactions today? How is that shaping the stories that you share with your children? How does that shape which church you decide to affiliate with, which schools you decide your children are going to attend, college decisions or vocational school decisions? How is that shaping? And then it just progresses more. How is that included now in our different institutions, our public school systems, unfortunately, our prison systems, and our political systems? Because we have to start peeling the onion and just peeling until we can get to the very core. And that's the point that I think we can start moving through a reconciliation process, because so far it hasn't worked with denial. So the caller's coming in, and we're going to take a break. Well, that was a little rough start. So welcome to the One Human Nation show.
Thank you.
And I want to start with the standard question that we ask, and that is, give us an idea of your background and where you grew up and where you went to school.
Okay, well, I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. I was raised here for most of my life, and I went to elementary school in a predominantly black school on the west side of Savannah. My middle school was predominantly black, and my high school, Windsor Forest, which I just graduated from this May, is predominantly black.
Okay, and that's so different from my story, because when I attended Windsor Forest, it was predominantly white.
Right.
So we won't say how many years that's been different. Okay. So tell us a little bit about going through a predominantly black elementary school and where you grew up. I'm assuming the neighborhood was predominantly black also.
Yes.
So did you have any experience as far as thinking about race or identity and any of that growing up? Or when was the first time that you started realizing that you were being judged, or there was a question, or anything related to race came up in your world?
Well, it was pretty easy selling because I'm black and I found comfort in being around other black people. I felt really accepted. But in middle school is when I had my first real understanding that there were different races other than me, if that makes sense. It was about 8th grade. I had a lot of, white friends and some Asian friends. So the other eighth graders will always label my friends like, oh, yeah, you're with the white girl or the Asian girl. So that's when I really, oh, there's not just black people. There's white people. There's Asian people. There's Indian people.
Okay.
So that was kind of my first realization.
And did that change as far as which friends you had? Or, I explained to the listeners that one of the books that I'm reading is Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?
Mm-hmm.
What was your experience, that kind of cafeteria experience like?
Well, it didn't really change who I hung out with because I'm kind of reserved and quiet, so I didn't really hang out or have a lot in common with the louder, more eccentric other kids. But I hung out with all different types of people because I grew up in a house where we didn't care about skin color that much, So
you did say that much, so there was a little qualifier there. Now, we've talked, I've shared with the listeners that even within, and I hate the word race because it's something that was created in this country. There's, there's only one human species, but we created this thing called race. And
right.
Even within the African American culture, there is a preference or there's a distinction made on whether you are a light-skinned person or whether you are a darker-skinned person. So when you say there wasn't a preference on, or, there wasn't a conversation about color, you want to explain about that a little bit more based on, what you were experiencing in your household as it related to color?
Yes. In my household, I live with my mother. So she would always watch the news, and I always knew about all the conflicts going on.
Mm-hmm.
But she never really labeled other races, like how I was mentioning in middle school when they would say the white girl, like the main characteristic was skin color. But in my household, my mother or my father or my grandparents never labeled people by their skin color. They would always describe them some way else. So it wasn't a big topic.
Okay.
When I grew up.
And so one of the things that when we talked about, as far as, how were you received by your friends because you were more quiet? I mean, how did they perceive you to be, for want of a better description, as a black girl? I mean, how did they perceive you to be because you were more quiet and you were not, to use your word, as eccentric or loud as the other, kids around? What did you get labeled as?
I'm not really sure what they thought of me because they never expressed it to me, but they probably thought I was raised in like the suburbs, which I was, and I had a mother who was probably middle class, high class.
So
I'm not sure.
So when someone asks you, it seems you mentioned to me that you would get asked the question, are you mixed with something else?
Yes.
So what was the reason for that?
I think the reason for that was because people were looking for me to be mixed with something else. This was like 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and since I'm not like super dark skinned, they were like searching for me to be some other race, and I just said I'm black because that's what I am. So
right. So that
I think searching.
Yeah. So I think what was interesting to me in having the conversation with you was really how comfortable you were in your skin all through going through elementary school, junior high school, high school. I mean, it didn't sound like to me that you had those moments of identity crisis based on, okay, what, who am I? That didn't appear to be your experience. And then, I'm curious as far as the education side of it, was there assumptions made about whether you should be an achiever or whether, what were assumptions made because of the color of your skin?
Well, referring back to middle school, which a lot of this racial understanding happened, I don't know why, but my peers, they expected me to be regular, not really achieving much, just making making it by. But they expected the white kids to excel and do great in everything, which they did. And I mean, I didn't really care about it back then because I was like, oh, I'm just having fun. But
Right.
now it makes me want to strive to do better than them, I guess,
So
because
yeah.
it's not really expected of me.
Right. And so going through school, where and I don't know, because I didn't think to ask you this when we talked before, were your teachers primarily white? Were they black? Was there, um,
Huh. That's a good question. Actually, in middle school, they were mostly white. I had some Asian teachers. In high school, it was probably about half and half.
okay. So how did you, because, so share with us what choice or what direction are you going to be going for college? What do you think you're going to be majoring in?
Well, I'm going to be going to college in Atlanta at Georgia State, and I'm going to be majoring in chemistry with a pre-dentistry background track. So that's basically what I'm looking forward to in the next 4 years.
Which I'm in awe of anybody, with the whole chemistry and
Yes, it is.
aptitude for that whole side of it. So how did you get directed in that? I mean, especially for females, that's typically not the direction that we're. I hate to use the word steered, but that's what it is. That's typically not the direction that we're steered towards, math and science. How did that come about that you got so involved in that side of it that's the career direction that you're going?
Well, my mother actually majored in chemistry,
Okay.
and a few years back when she would tell me that, I was like, oh my gosh, why would you do that? That's so hard. It was so negative in my mind. And then I took a chemistry class in high school, and I happened to be really good at it. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And then as I got older and I went through the years, I noticed that every class after that was not as exciting to me. And I will always think back on that particular class, and I'm like, that is my passion. And I always look up interesting chemistry facts because it's so fascinating to me. So
Okay.
that's what made me choose that major.
Well, so you must be got it through your genes, and I say that laughingly because
Yes.
I don't know. That was fascinating for me. So, if you can hold on the line, I need to do a little break, but you can hold on, and I'll be right back with you. Okay.
Okay.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Sentient Bean, offering fair trade coffee, vegan and vegetarian food, and breakfast all day. Located at 13 East Park Avenue, across the street from the tennis courts at Forsyth Park. Our menu and special events listings can be found at sentientbean.com. WRUU is now collecting items for the annual Savannah Soundings fundraising auction. The auction will run from July 15th to July 30th, with proceeds going to WRUU to continue providing both great music and a voice for the Savannah community. Auction items range from gift cards to vouchers for products and services that are guaranteed to delight and surprise. Tell everyone you know about donating and about the auction. Donations can be made now. For information on donation, contact Trent Kissinger at TAKISSINGER@gmail.com.
Okay, Sydney, we are back.
Okay.
So let me ask you this: going through school, I guess more so high school. Were you aware? I mean, what was the environment like as far as being invited? Were you invited to parties with different ethnicities, or was it primarily African American, or what? How was that? How was that played out in your high school?
My high school was, like I said, predominantly black, and it was very cultured, I like to say. So in my underclassmen years, like freshman and sophomore year, I was in class with the entire population, so I got a lot more of the, how phrase this. The more cultured, I guess that's the only word I can use, the more cultured side. So I would be invited to parties, I probably didn't go because my mother, but I got invited a lot, I guess. And then my upperclassmen years, like junior and senior year, I started doing the IB track. So I was more steered towards the white population and the Asians and, Indian. And it was kind of like the elite group, I guess. So I got invited a lot less, but I don't think it was because it was any tension. It's just because I was with a different group of people.
Okay. So was there, and this is fascinating, this is one reason why I am encouraging people to read the book, Why Are the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Because it sounds like there was there was the intention set from your parents that you would be on a particular track.
Yes.
Okay, so
my mother didn't directly tell me to do the IB track, but for some reason I had some friends that were doing it, and I'm like, oh, that seems cool. So I just jumped in, and it happened to benefit me.
Right. So just for the benefit of our listeners, what is the IB track?
The IB track is International Baccalaureate, and it's basically all around the world, and you take a specific IB classes. So it's like up there with AP classes, and it's just a higher level class. It's a more vigorous curriculum.
Okay.
And you actually can get college credit for it. Okay.
So that kind of got you in the position. So you were always on the track of knowing that you were going to be going to college. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
Basically.
Okay. So believe it or not, we are coming up to almost a 5:45 here. So I just wanted to ask you, was there anything that you want to share with kids that are going through maybe a more difficult time or a different experience with their identity based on what they're being exposed to in elementary school? Is there any advice that you can give to them or maybe their parents? Because it sounds like your influence from your parents helped ground you tremendously in knowing who you were as a person, and it wasn't based on
other people.
You're just very centered in knowing who you are, which I wasn't at your age, and it was it was just not something that it was just a different time, I think, and because I was put in a situation where I was second grade, like the only black person in classes at a very early age. So I think that's when a lot of your identity is being formed. So any words of wisdom or advice or just your thoughts on do you think it's more beneficial to be in one way or the other? Not that you go back and change anything but it sounds like that helped you a lot, being in an environment that you really were very grounded in who you were as a black person.
Yes. Well, I do have some advice. And I feel like anybody can flourish in an environment. They just have to have a different mindset.
Good.
So, one, you have to learn to love yourself. And this isn't something that happens overnight, like most people know. And there's a bunch of books out there about anything, how to be successful, how to love yourself, how to be beautiful, just a lot of self-help books. And I heard a quote that was really interesting. It said, if you don't want black people to figure out something, put it in a book. And I really resonated with that because I feel like black people don't really read as much. I might be wrong, but that's just how I feel. And
I don't think people in general read that much. Just so that's my take on it. Is we have gotten away a lot from, I think, the reading, but I'm probably wrong too. But I think you're right. I think we're not a society in general that reads a lot because there's just so much more sensationalism in what we see, the visual, and what we watch on TV, and even our news now is sensationalized, so people, it will grab their attention. Any particular book that you that resonates with you that you think would be beneficial?
Oh, wow.
You can email me later. You can let me know later, and I'll post it on the website. So yeah, definitely, think about that. And if there's some books that you specifically think would be helpful, whether it's from what a parent can do, or whether it's from looking at it from a child perspective, or right now teenage perspective for you, just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to post it on the website, because I am going to add a page to the website that's really going to be book resources, because I agree with you. We need to read more, and that's part of being curious, is just to explore through books other cultures and how we can start moving through some of our biases. And there's some wonderful, there's just a lot of material out there, but we have to be open. We have to be open to it. Well, Sydney, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? And, I'm wishing you the best as you go off on this next phase of your journey. And, the expectation is set very high. No, I'm just kidding. Well, not really. But the expectation is that, I know you'll do well and you'll be successful at your intended course. And if at any time that you're on that journey, and I know your mom, they do great and get you centered with that, but if you need a impartial voice, or you can always contact me also.
Right.
But that's probably everything, unless there's something else that you want to share with the listeners.
One thing I wanted to say was that I kind of came to this understanding today when I was thinking about what I was going to say, is that we have to realize that we're all on this world to work together in an enjoyable way. So race we just made up, and we're all here for a reason. So instead of trying to discriminate and trying to put yourself in a group and go against another group, we should really try to work together, because you only have one life, so you want it to be, fulfilling and fun. So
I think that's great. I think that's great advice, and I think that is part of this journey, is how do we go through the reconciliation and healing that needs to happen. And I do think it starts at a very young age, and we have to break this cycle that goes from generation to generation. And I know you had mentioned to me, you wonder if you'll feel this way when you listen to the show,
yes,
a couple of years later. So you have an open invitation. You can come back a year after you finish your first year in college if you want, and see if something's changed. The door is open, so it'll be interesting to follow your journey along as you move through this next segment of your journey. And I wish you all the best. So thanks for sharing your stories with us, Sydney.
Thank
you. Yes, wish you all the best. Okay. Okay. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Alrighty. Bye-bye. Well, you're listening to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. So we had a different perspective today from someone that is just graduating or has already graduated from high school and that's going to be going to college. And so I hope all of you had a different, perspective, because everyone else that we've had on the show are adults that are further along in their journey. And most of them have already had kids, gone through college. So that was a little different perspective, and I appreciate that Sydney shared her thoughts with us. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll come back, and I want to talk to you some more about as we go through this One Human Nation journey, and some things that I would suggest for you to do over the next couple of days if you haven't already started in this part of your journey about being curious. But we'll take a short break and be right back.
LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Sentient Bean, offering fair trade coffee, vegan and vegetarian food, and breakfast all day. Located at 13 East Park Avenue, across the street from the tennis courts at Forsyth Park. Our menu and special events listings can be found at sentientbean.com.
Well, welcome back to the One Human Nation show. And as we start our wrap up process for today's show, I do want to share some information with you that I'm really finding to be fascinating from the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And this is in part, this is in the part of the book that has the discussion questions. So one of the questions that I want to leave with you to reflect on is what distortions, deficiencies, assumptions, historical and cultural omissions, stereotypes have affected your attitudes toward ethnic groups other than your own. I know that's a mouthful, so I'm going to repeat it one more time. What distortions, deficiencies, assumptions, historical and cultural omissions, and stereotypes have affected your attitudes toward ethnic groups other than your own? And the other part of this question is, what distortions, deficiencies, and stereotypes do you see influencing children, adolescents, and adults today? And what corrective actions might we engage in? So I know that's a lot to think about as we continue to go through our reconciliation journey. I think it's very important to think about what are we doing intentionally or unintentionally, knowingly or unknowingly, that continues to reinforce this thing that we have created in this country surrounding race and racism. And it is a two-sided coin. It does not matter whether you are white or a person of color. It's going to require all of us being intentional, all of us being aware and awake. It doesn't matter whether you have children or not. It's all part of our journey. And what is it going to take as we continue to, I think the rational human beings among us would like to see that we are moving towards being one human nation. The guest, mentioned that we want to, and it's so funny hearing it in the terms of, we want to have fun, we want to have a good time in this life that we have, because it really is, it's a very short period of time that we're going to be on this earth. And I think it's great to have someone that is at that point in their development at such a young age that really gets, why is it important? Because all of us want a good quality of life. I don't think any rational person would say, well, no, I really don't want to have a good quality of life. I really do want to have constant chaos. And, I want everything, to be, totally difficult all the time, and walk around, angry. And I totally get the anger. I get the resentment. I also, to some extent, understand the fear, and all of that. I think is caused because we have not really engaged in the conversations. So that's one of the things that I'm still continuing to search for in Savannah, is where are we having these conversations about race and reconciliation? If you are aware of some different groups that have already engaged in this type of work in Savannah, please let me know. You can send me an email at mystory@onehumannation.info. I'm really looking to engage with some groups that have already started doing this work. And I've mentioned before, this is something that was very much a part of work being done in Austin with the One Human Race Initiative. And, we can always do that in Savannah also, depending on the interest. But I do want to find out if there are any other conversations already happening in the city of Savannah, because I would love to team up and collaborate. As a reminder, remember you can always take care of that wonderful implicit association test if you haven't already done that by going to the One Human Nation website, and that's at www.onehumannation.info. And coming up at the top of the hour is going to be Sound Limit with Troy Stoner. I hope you have a good week and continue to reflect on what it's going to take for us to be one human nation.